Kopitiam Conversations.
This is Kopitiam Conversations. I'm your host, Winston. In this episode, my guest and I go back almost 10 years. We had been colleagues previously at my former workplace. Dr Antoon de Rycker is an associate professor at the School of Media and Communication at Taylorsuniversity, Subang, Jaya. A linguist and discourse analyst by training, Dr de Rycker has branched out into areas such as creativity, professional development, and business communication. He has conducted training sessions and workshops for a wide range of audiences. His motto is Learn and Build. A Belgian national, he has lived and worked in Malaysia since 2009. Morning, Dr. Antoon. It's so good to see you again after so long, and I think it's been nearly more than 2 years, right, since we actually met each other face to face. If you can
nice
call
to
it
see you too, Winston. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Right, it's always nice to have a platform in which I can share, some of my ideas and my experience, and I hope that there's always one or two nuggets for somebody who I don't even know, right, in the audience right now. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah, sometimes we don't have the time to sort of probe or dig a little bit deeper into some of these existential questions.
Yeah, why am I here? What am I doing here? Right?
Yeah. Where is this going? Where I'm coming from? Yeah, it's quite philosophical, actually. Immanuel Kant. Yeah.
Yep. And you find, I think, a lot more people thinking about that now, especially being in lockdown. What am I doing here? Is there more to life than just being in a lockdown?
No, I think it's very true what you're saying. And first I read about it, and I sort of realized that I was actually going through the same reassessment of a lot of things. And I think honestly that a number of my sort of recent major decisions have been influenced by the COVID-19 lockdown, and so it's nice not to be like, you feel I'm not an outlier here. This is sort of a trend in which people, we are forced to kind of look at these building blocks. You know that story about the big rocks that we have, and that sort of props up our lives. So that's good, yeah.
Yep. And this is a platform, of course. This podcast is a platform for our audience to actually get some bite-sized inspiration from. So for those of you who are listening in, all right, know that you are not alone, suffering and questioning about life, in your own isolation. Know that we are all going through the same thing.
But on the flip side, I was also reading about how mental health counselors deal with this, and they say you should also realize you're not celebrating alone either, right? I mean, there's of course the challenges of being locked down, if you like, but there is also, normally when we celebrate achievements or happiness, that's also a very social thing. So you can also reach out, I think, to have that too.
These days, a lot of people are posting up pictures of getting vaccinated on Instagram, and I think that's also reason to celebrate, because we feel as if we are one step closer to actually achieving some level of freedom, being able to go up after our second dose, right?
Yeah, you're right. I noticed. I actually like seeing those. Saya telah divaksinasi.
Oh yeah.
Pictures. Yeah. I had mine on Friday last week, so that was a bit of an adventure because I went to UKM in Bangi.
Nice.
I think I clicked the wrong box, otherwise I could have gone down the road here, but I enjoyed the outing. I drove as slowly as I could just to enjoy being outside and in the car.
Yep.
If I saw a roadblock, I would just go right to the roadblock so I could chat with the Anggota Police.
Oh yeah, I show them my Sejatra says that my appointment is here. So
yeah, that was it.
So Antoon, you're very familiar with Malaysian customs and how things work in Malaysia. Well, kind of, all right? There's always that disclaimer there, kind of, because you're never really certain of how things work in Malaysia. Now, you have spent 12 years in Malaysia. Tell us how you heard about Malaysia from Belgium, and what made you decide to move to hot and humid Malaysia?
Um, First off, I'd like to say that every expat has a story, right? And every expat is in a sense unique. You need to know that I also lived in the United States of America, upstate New York for a while, and I also spent considerable time in the UK.
Right.
And coming back to Belgium, because I'm a Belgian national, the northern part of Belgium, we speak Dutch. But Belgium is a trilingual country, right? So we also have French and German. So anyway, coming back to Belgium at that point, I realized that as a tourist, you only get to sort of scratch the surface of any place. And of course, we need to be tourists, but I always felt that sort of, what is it, some kind of pull, if you like, that I wanted to live elsewhere as well. And the way it went is a bit like this. In the 1980s, after my Belgian master's, I applied for a scholarship because when I graduated, there was this massive graduate unemployment. And when I talk to some of my ex-students, alumni here as well now, I can relate to it. It's not exactly the same, but we would be leaving uni or college, and there was literally nothing there for us.
Really?
So I thought, not perhaps lawyers and doctors and engineers, but within, let's say, the non-STEM, humanities, languages, history, philosophy, and I had studied linguistics, by the way, which is almost like a straight ticket to the breadline, right? So that's unless you can be at secondary school. Anyway, my tactic was, okay, I'm going to go for scholarships. So I applied left and right. I went through all sorts of filtering systems, and I got the British Council one. Couldn't choose my own university, but I went to Reading. Back then, I did a master's in linguistics. There was another master's in applied linguistics, and the pure linguistics was about 6-7 people. And I think we were from 4 different countries, but the applied linguistics was about 15 to 20 countries, a lot of them from, the Commonwealth. Mm-hmm. So that's where I started meeting my first Malaysians, right? I made friends with the Malaysians, part of the cohort, right? So I stayed in touch on and off. Of course, we had to be helped at some point by Mark Zuckerberg and internet and Facebook to reconnect later on, because, and I really enjoyed that sort of international ambience, because I'm from Belgium, right? But basically, I always say we're all very kampung. Huh? We have 300 people we know, and we don't move a lot, and we are happy to travel for 1 week to 2 weeks, and then we come back, and then it's back to normal, right? So I became restless after a while, and then I was reaching out to people I had met. What made Malaysia at that time appealing was I also had this sort of romantic idea based on the children's books I was reading when I was a kid, these adventures in the South China Sea, the exploration of the tropical areas. And I was lapping up those adventure stories. I mean, if you've seen Pirates of the Caribbean, that kind of swashbuckling and shipwreck finding. Pardon?
You didn't mention Malaysia at all.
No, this back then it was Malaya, right? Or it was just Semenanjung and Indonesia.
And Singapore.
Singapore.
Singapore is
of course, growing up in Belgium, the Dutch language part, we also read the Netherlandic or the Holland's literature. And because of its colonial past, there is a lot of literature in Dutch about the colonial period.
Yeah, the Dutch East Indies at Indonesia, right?
Yeah, which I also felt sort of, you learn about, I remember reading about Chris,
Right.
And other things that were part of the culture around here. So that definitely was something that and then of course, what makes Malaysia a relatively, if I may say so, a kind of low threshold intro into Southeast Asia is that because of its own past, its multilingualism, you can almost like scope the region by just coming to Malaysia, and English makes it, of course, easier. I know people who've gone through Indonesia. Their bahasa is, of course, much better, much more fluent. Fasih. In my case, it's always a bit funny because there is always English there, but that makes it easy. And then I was also looking forward to living in the tropics. Are you familiar with SAD, or seasonal affective disorder?
Yes, I suffered that when I was in UK. Yes.
Yeah.
Especially in the winter months, it's all dark and
Oh
gloomy.
yeah, that's terrible.
Cool, yeah.
And I've read stories about, of course, Belgium is also relatively, I mean, we have about 10-15% Belgians from, Moroccan or Turkish background and origin. So I've read about families moving from the north of Africa to Europe and to Belgium, and they also suffer badly because the sun is not sort of shining and beating down on us the whole day.
Yep.
So your vitamin D intake is reduced. But anyway, so I thought living in a different climate where there is that sort of what I call stability, or every day is pretty much the same, isn't it? I can look out of the window and I have no idea. There's nothing to tell me. In Europe, you can see that kind of progression, right? So.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the summer is over, I have to go back to school. That kind of punctuation, as I call it, we don't have.
Yep.
So it kind of sort of evens things out and becomes gentle. So the idea of the tropics and so on. But Winston, I didn't sort of cut all my moorings immediately. I actually was on probation here.
All right.
From my Belgian contract. So I only decided later on to sever my tie and move to Malaysia.
Okay.
But the humidity takes getting used to, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, even if you
Initially, I would leave my condo unit. I had to go back immediately. I mean, I would just
it's difficult
get drenched
without the air conditioning. It's quite difficult
Yeah.
to manage without it. According to the Malay Mail report on January 11th this year, with regards to the brain drain phenomenon, nearly 1.7 million Malaysians are employed outside the country, with, of course, Singapore being the biggest beneficiary with 54%, followed by Australia about 15% and United Kingdom about 5% of those Malaysians outside of the country. Now, you, on the other hand, you had reversed this trend and chose Malaysia. You have just told us the story of how you arrived at Malaysia. So what were the motivations for you to remain in Malaysia? 12 years is a pretty long time, actually.
Yeah, it's a long time. And I have friends and acquaintances who worry about me, and they ask me, what are you still doing here? Because the script is that I would be an island hopper, right? 4 or 5 years and on to, I don't know, Laos or maybe Korea. I don't know, anything like this. So I'm sort of bucking that trend. So the friends ask me, what are you doing here? And I think that's important because the doing is what I find is something, to me, as a non-Malaysian 12-year resident, I always find there is lots to do. I don't know if you see it the same way, but I feel there is something about Malaysia where if you're willing to work hard and you have ideas and you have the space to develop initiatives, there's things that can be done, right? I mean, it's I get a sense, maybe when I lived in the US, one of the things you get is a sense of space, which you don't have in Belgium, right? In Belgium, you open your kitchen door into the back door into the garden, you're already in another city, right? I mean, it's in the US, people told me, do you want to go to a gig tonight? I said, yes, why? Yes, it's a banjo playing band. Okay, why not? It's the US, right? So I get into the car, and then we drove for 2.5 hours just to see a gig. So space means something else. And I find in Malaysia, time, of course, is different too. But there is a sense of, things need to be done, can be done if you're willing to pick up the baton. And I think that's sort of, I realize there may be a bit of status inflation, but generally I have been getting opportunities here that I probably would not have had back home. Not because the market is saturated, but it's a bit more regulated. You know, in the United States, the idea is that you don't count, right? It's not you. We hire you because you have a skill set and a qualification.
Right.
In Malaysia, it's to me almost the opposite. We want you in, and we would like you to be on the team because of who you are, right? And never mind the qualifications or the skills you have. We can relate to you, you can relate to us, and then things will grow from there.
Yep.
So I've been given opportunities for academic leadership, for research projects. Back in Belgium, I would be more hesitant and, oh yeah, but I don't have a degree in economics. I didn't study business management. I sort of, you disqualify yourself. And I'm not saying because there is a higher level of specialization, but it's because that's the sort of the mindset, right?
Right.
In Malaysia, I feel there is sort of a willingness to, I mean, if you're willing to work hard and learn fast, that you can be given. So I think, to me personally, that was a discovery that I could be more. So that definitely kept me here, and I've been fortunate enough to meet people, line managers, if you like, that encouraged that in me as well. Whereas in Belgium, they might say, yeah, but you don't have the right qualifications, or you need to have 5 years experience. I see life a bit as an experiment where you can assign yourself to a certain condition, right? It's not some sort of a, but it's research that puts you in the control group or into the experimental group. We ourselves we can reassign ourselves to. And if you value personal growth and self-improvement and professional development, as I do, and to me that means lifelong learning. Sometimes when I speak, I say my motto is learn and build, and I will stay as long as I can learn and or build. But if I'm not building anything and not learning anything, I might go. Unless, and that's the next stage, is I feel I'm serving a community. In sociology, you may not want to hear this. They often say that nations and communities are imagined.
Right. Yeah.
Doesn't really exist.
Yeah. Imagine communities. Or Benedict Anderson, right, or something like that.
Say again?
That book, Imagine Communities. Or was it Benedict Anderson? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I forget the earliest reference here, but I always see it as something positive that, you know, in Malaysia, it's all about nation building, isn't it? And about harmony, and that actually has to be imagined, and then the imagination allows us to act on it. So I feel when one of the reasons I'm still here is that I can belong to various communities, and of course the main one would be the professional community of academics. But over the last few years, especially with the pandemic, I also reframe, if you like, my relationship to my students. You may know that the original meaning of university in Latin is a community, and then it goes on of students and scholars, right? Of professors and students. And I feel with the pandemic that despite, you know, the whole virtualization, that there is more of, it's not me and you, it's all of us going through these challenging times in a kind of learning experience. But it's not that it was like, okay, I'm going to do this for 10 or 5, 10, 15 years. No, it's sort of, end of contract. And then you sort of almost inadvertently get it renewed. I mean, and then it's another year, right? And time is playing tricks here, right? You know, that I think of time as very, and all of a sudden it's 10, and now all of a sudden it's 12, right? So but the other thing that keeps me here, Winston, and that's one of the reasons why we are here, you and I, you make friends, okay? You meet people. but generally Malaysian lifestyle, very outdoors. Yeah, there is time to, you know, hang out, laid back, socialize. This can be around food, of course.
In Malaysia, definitely around food.
Yeah. But I've also had very, very nice memories of staff trips or going with friends on hikes. And I think in addition to the climate, of course, the nature and, you know, I've been to Tamanagara. I mean, that's unforgettable, right? I mean, so that becomes a motivation in its own right, I think. So looking back over 12 years, I think I've had my fair share of initially maybe just open houses, but then weddings, baby showers, birthday parties. And I remember my first wedding, just to a little bit of sort of that intercultural differences, if you're interested. A Belgian wedding, usually there will be a church wedding, a state wedding, and then a reception and a dinner party that is also a dance party. So to make it to the dinner party, that's subject to long negotiations between the two families going to be united, because it's going to be limited to perhaps 120 people only. So if you make the guest list, it means something. So the first time I got an invitation to, this was a Malay wedding actually, I thought, oh my goodness, I'm just here for a year and a half and I make the guest list?
Yep, you made the cut.
But I realized that there is this abundance, this complete, I mean, this overwhelming abundance of hospitality, and the more the merrier. And when I got to the wedding, I don't say I was disappointed, I was just more like gobsmacked to see I was one out of maybe 800 guests.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It was nice. I mean, yeah, it was.
Generally speaking, I think Malay weddings tend to be more communal, a lot bigger, right? So I think I've been invited to Malay weddings many times before, and you know that the invitation card will always say "seisi keluarga." That means you invite your whole family as well.
But generally, all the parties I've been is, you come and go, you help yourself to the food. My background is, for instance, that you don't touch the food until the oldest person around the table digs in or starts. So I was told I remember this, you don't have to wait. You can just, I mean, the food is served, you begin. It's not something that is inappropriate or...
I think it's still practiced in certain families whereby the elders will always start, but I think that is slowly eroding away, and the practice is probably not being done very much anymore these days. I mean, it's like, hey, those kind of ceremonies, just dig in. I think it's just that level.
Because I made people feel uncomfortable by waiting, right? It's like I'm forcing a certain expectation upon them. They felt uncomfortable. But I think, Winston, when you visit someone, when you go to an open house or you visit friends at home, you would have to say hello or salam, the eldest person first, right? Because now I know that I have to sometimes look for that person.
The most
it's usually
person
90-year-old great grandmother somewhere in the back of the house. So
And of course, in Malaysia, we always call someone older than us, uncle, auntie, that kind of term of endearment.
It's interesting you raise that, because I also had to get used to kids. Calling you uncle is one thing, but not sort of. It's like ages mixed differently. I used to live in near Bukit Gasing, I think, and there is a football field, and I would go there for walks and runs, but people would play football, and I could see that this was from the age of 6 to the age of 55 or 56, right? And playing my two teams. I think where I'm from, that would be looked upon as not done or weird.
Maybe
it's
among
not
family
weird,
members,
right?
Yes, right? Among family members.
Family, uncles, something like this. Because we would all come down from the bungalows or the condos to that same, of course, people would know, right? There was a level of familiarity with each other, but I thought it was kind of cute, right? So these football teams sort of made up of different ages.
The junior team and the senior team. Yeah, but I guess football unites people that way. Now you had a teaching stint at University Malaya for about more than 10 years ago. Was that your first teaching position in Malaysia?
When I was getting a bit serious about, I think I wanted to move, right? Initially, maybe just for 2 years, I had no idea. So through my Malaysian friends, they said, yeah, University Malaya, which is also in Petaling Jaya, where I ended up, is, especially in its faculty Bahasa dan Linguistic, it's very international, right? And they have a lot of visiting professors from various parts of the world. They also have what I think called a start professorship. So they have one kind of beacon or lighthouse or magnet that has a special relationship to the faculty. So what I basically did was a cold, unsolicited application where I wrote to the dean, Professor Azira. That was a timeline of about a year, right? Because initially I was invited to do a 2-week visiting professorship, so to get a sense of the lay of the land, and so it was not sort of a jumping straight into it, right? So I did 2 of those. During that period, I was expected to hold a lot of workshops, lectures, meet graduate students, staff, and then I met Professor Azira, the Dean and Decan, also in Europe when there was an applied linguistics conference. And it took me a while. This was funny, right? I mean, I thought, oh, she's kind of like developing an interest in me, but she was actually sort of sizing me up, right? So we had a few meets because I also had other friends attending the conference. And I think looking back, this was sort of a kind of a job interview, but not the standard job interview. Right. So we would have a couple of sit downs, meals, coffees, and we would sort of chit chat. But sometimes I felt, actually I want to figure out if I would be a good person organization fit and a good person job fit. Right. So at one point then I did apply. I did all the forms. Some of them, or many of them, were in BM, so I had a lot of translation to do. Thank you, Google Translate. was for me a natural choice because I'm actually a public uni person. So in Belgium, we do not have private sector education or higher education. So to me, a public uni is where it's happening, right? I'm a public uni product myself. Okay? So that means that you are not, it's not about the bottom line, it's not about student enrollment, it's not student numbers, it's about other things. So that was for me, I mean, that's why initially was, I think for me, the sort of natural extension of what I have been doing. So I was here twice, and then I made the leap, and then I got here, I think in June 2009, I think.
Now you taught at University Malaya, and much later you taught at Taylor's and Jaya. So how is the teaching culture different in a public university? And saying now that you are also product of public university, so how is the teaching culture different in a public university compared to those at a private university?
I think the culture, I mean, the teaching, the delivery, the content, I can only speak for myself, of course. I except for a few classroom visitations, I have no idea what's happening elsewhere, right? But I think it's pretty much the same, right? In the sense that one of the things I didn't know when I did move eventually to the private sector, I was curious. I mean, of course, as I said earlier, I'd like to experiment and learn. So I thought, let's try this. I mean, let's see where it goes. People often said it's about the money. Actually, that was the least of my concerns. It was more like I had this high expectation that I would be working in a more innovative, forward-looking, creative environment.
Mhm.
What I didn't realize was that it's still MQA regulated. The leeway in which private sector universities can promote their own pedagogical project, to me, is limited. I thought I was joining a completely different industry where you could be really, what's the word? I mean, be on top of everything, take decisions, do things
Cutting
differently.
edge, groundbreaking.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, you can just go into our thesaurus here and come up with all these adjectives, which I thought was what I was going to be a part of. But it's the same thing. So can we do things differently? I was hoping to come up or to be in that context and to perhaps make a contribution to it as well. More flexibility, more creativity, more keeping that sort of focus on what is the actual learning outcomes, but the way we achieve the learning outcomes may be detrimental to achieving the learning outcomes because the structure is so, that's the irony, right?
Yep.
We want students to think independently, but the whole system is based on dependence.
Exactly, pulling you down because you are dependent on that structure.
But it's broadly similar. So even though a lot of my friends say, yeah, it's a big difference and one is better or in some areas, the one thing I noticed immediately was UKM. I mean, these are like cities, right? A sprawling, vast green campus. I remember having to take a taxi. I'm not kidding you, right? To go to the Chancellery building or to the Sumber Manusia. I remember at I would walk there, right? By the time I get to HR, I would be ready for oxygen tent, I guess, or a shower or a change. So essentially it's the same, and that's what I'm saying. Classrooms, lecture halls, of course, Taylor's was a brand new campus, and I think I was fortunate to be hired at the beginning of something exciting.
Right.
And Winston and I were there, by the way, so I think we were doing something
2010.
Pioneering.
2010, we were there in the new campus.
And I'm very happy, actually, that I've been able in this media and comm world to learn a lot, right, and to respect it as a serious discipline. And I see people worry about, for example, government communication around COVID, and I think, okay, that's PR, that's media relations, that's where we need well-trained, but also strong academic, evidence-based knowledge. One of my big problems with comm programs, not enough psychology. We're in the business of getting people to do things with words and pictures, right? But I'm sorry if I'm slipping in perhaps a bit of my agenda, but I feel that every discipline, no matter what you study, engineering, architecture, you need two things: psychology, because that's about meaning,
right,
and you need to have a sense of business because that's about money. And if you do not inject that into a program, it might remain a bit disjointed from reality. We're teaching journalism. Our journalism students, do they know how the whole industry actually works? And it's cost cutting, doing things on the cheap, getting, ready-made from newswire services. But I'm just saying, business and psychology, I find is an important thing. I taught psycholinguistics, by the way.
And obviously that creates a gap between what is taught at the university and what is actually caught in the industry. They go into the industry with that rude awakening. Oh my gosh, it's all about the dollars and cents. It's all about cost-cutting measures, and all right, the one who has provides the lowest cost wins. That kind of thing. A lot of Malaysians don't learn this until they eventually go out there, and it's all basically down to dollars and cents. Yeah, and of course,
I mean, we know, in all fairness, we have our export forums, we have our webinars and guest speakers and so on and so forth. And this is not a Malaysian issue, this is a Belgian issue as well, right? I mean, and that's what I was also expecting to see in the private sector, that we would be more nimble, that our programs could be reviewed differently, and that we could have our finger on the pulse. But I think it's sort of same, and I understand the problem with quality assurance is you have to freeze the thing in order to measure the quality and to ascertain it.
Yep.
But the reality is that we would like to be not like an ocean liner flying a route between Rotterdam and Johannesburg or something.
All right.
But that we would like to be more nimble. The kind of vibe I'm getting from young entrepreneurs in Malaysia. I think MQA is a wonderful thing. I was there in Europe when we had the EFQM, the European Framework for Quality Management.
All right.
Was there when we put our programs through all sort of rigorous checks and balances and testing. And I think there is definitely something to be gained from this. But I do feel it's been pushed to an extreme where it becomes arbitrary. So if we are in 2021 still struggling with how many MLOs, I think, what the point is it?
Yeah.
I feel that perhaps there should be a certain amount of trust. And of course, another system of, separating, the fly-by-night cowboys from the genuine institutions, and where we can differentiate and offer, which I think is perhaps what you get in Europe a bit more choice, right? More choice. So then you can really choose, especially if you're a parent, right? Because you put your kids through a system that will have an enormous influence on them in the next 40 years, maybe, for life. So.
You mentioned that there were many reasons why you remain in Malaysia, right? But let's also look at, what are those things? What about those things that you dislike, or things which stresses you out about Malaysia?
The things that stressed me out were the things I was not ready for, right? So it's something that surprises you.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I had to come to terms with, if you like, or to find ways of handling is, in order to be an expat in Malaysia, you need to have strong resilience, a strong backbone, because it's not easy. It's a constant form-filling activity, right? So I didn't know how much paperwork that would involve. I cannot compare, because in the US and the UK, I did not move there, right? But so I didn't know that just being here would take up so much of my energy. Immigration, employment pass, just being somewhere is quite a challenge. And it made me look at what's happening in Belgium with lots of undocumented immigrants and illegal aliens. I think the US, it made me look at that differently, right? So that's, so you have to be patient. It's a bit of an Olympian challenge, I think, but what I learned along the way is you have to be prepared for anything. So I would go to official also at UM, I remember, I would go with a backpack with practically anything that I could think of. I'll give you an example. We need hard copies of your passport. Winston, that's simple enough. No, it isn't. Full color, black and white. 1 page per A4 or 2-sided. Every single page, including the cover or not. Blown up version of your biometric page and maybe your RPT or something or not. You go to one, please use a blue pen. You go elsewhere, you have filled in the form with a blue pen. No, it's Tuesday, it has to be a black pen. And so you need to become very calm, right? You have to develop a kind of Zen attitude. And the thing that gives you a lot of courage is that eventually it gets done, right? I have not had any negative experience, but you have to be willing to learn. And what of course is a little frustrating is that I always say in Malaysia, the knowledge is collectively stored. It's not in the head of one person. But if you're dealing with one person, the knowledge will be partial. So the blue pen on Tuesday, or the black pen requirement on Tuesday, if I come back another Tuesday and there is somebody else, it may be a different color. I'm using it metaphorically, right? Because it's never been like this, but there is something there that you then have to jot down. So what I thought was I'm a researcher. Okay, I'm just going to wear my research hat, observational research, interviews, surveys among friends. Do I need to bring a water bottle? Is that going to take a long time? Usually I go as early as I can. I'd rather wait 60 minutes outside a locked door and be first and come later, right? So, I mean, these are things. But it's a challenge, and then you have to look at how much do you want it, because it's a means to an end, and then you develop the skills. So I think I also worked with a runner a couple of times. I also had some people helping me when I got my driver's license, for instance.
Right.
And of course, the other thing I was stressing me out was having to drive on the wrong side of the road. Huh? The other thing I had to learn was to respect the climate as well. Coming from Europe, where having a nice tan is a status symbol, or it's one that makes you look slightly more appetizing than that sort of real paleness that you might sometimes, that ghostly paleness that you might have. But I think initially I was not respectful of the weather, in the sense that I thought I can go out anytime. Now I know I have to wear a cap. There is the hot hour for a reason. I think I wasted a lot of time just conking out on my bed after 15 minutes in the sun, right? At the wrong time of the day.
I still struggle with that every now and then.
I thought it was drilled into kids. I thought that kids learn that. I thought that it was something that I wouldn't know because I was just.
No, you got two people running around without sunblocks and without a cap and without water bottles. So that rule doesn't apply to everyone. Yeah.
SPF 80.
Yeah. Being what they call you as Ang Mo or Mat Saleh for Caucasians, right? Did you ever feel you were singled out more often? And of course, were they mostly positives or negatives?
People would not call me anything to my face. I remember one incident, and I was sort of, what is the word? I was curious, what are they gonna call me, right? Because we learn all these words you can't say. So if somebody gets upset with my behavior, what would be the racial slur? So, but that was just only once. And generally, I think it cuts two ways, because for me to get any kind of negative reaction from a Malaysian, no matter which of the, how many, 26 or 30 ethnic groups you may or may not be from, and all the hybrids and all the gray areas, it's a two-way thing. So I feel that of course I would be bumping into more like cultural differences that we learn about, and initially you think there is no truth in them, but sort of that hierarchical thing, I mean, that's something that I definitely struggle with even till this day. I don't give face, right? I don't give face if you don't deserve it, and I'm very direct. And I know that's not always the best tactic and strategy, and I think it comes across as a lot more disrespectful than it is, because I'm from a different cultural background where we can argue and people think, oh, this is a fight, but this is just a debate during a meeting.
Oh, yeah.
And I learned quickly in Malaysia, you don't speak in a meeting, right?
Well, I guess that is, yeah.
I mean, you can defend yourselves. I mean, but I felt that I was not there for my ideas, but I think I also have to get perhaps a little bit used to how private sector unis work, right?
I guess it depends who's in the meeting, right?
Yeah, and what it is about, I guess, yeah. I think in Belgium, we are used to a bottom-up hierarchy. I'm not sure if you've met that term. It's a bottom-up hierarchy, meaning we accept one of us as our leader, but you have to prove it as well.
Oh yeah.
You earn it.
Yep.
And that's why we can be very relaxed among each other. Also because these positions, especially in academia, they rotate.
Yeah.
You're the head today, I might be the head tomorrow.
Yep.
But in a top-down hierarchy, not a bottom-up hierarchy, in a top-down one, it's a little more, for me, difficult.
Yeah. Higher power distance. Come
Yeah.
on, Malaysia's got the highest power distance ever, right? Yeah.
And I sometimes feel it's used in a kind of insincere way that sort of, what do we all think? I felt that question was not always sincere. It's more meant, I was in meetings with, like 25 people. It's not a meeting, right? That's a riot. So anyway, the big honcho then says, what do you all think? And I made a mistake a few times of actually sharing what I thought. But no, this is meant to see who's on my side. And if you're not on my side, and you're stupid enough to give a dissenting opinion, you walk around with a target on your back. The only thing that you're supposed to say is this: it's wonderful that the proposal was so clear. So you do that kind of laudatio, right?
Yep.
Which can also be insincere. And then you might as well not ask people for an opinion. You might just say, this is the plan, and now we're going to execute the plan. When I was head of department, the first thing I told my team was this: don't call me boss. I'm not the boss. I'm the head of department. It's an academic leadership position. It comes with certain things to do, which may be different from yours. Usually you have more decisions to make, which may affect you. If you lower down the scale, you don't take a lot of decisions. But one day you can be, and I'm not your boss. This is not my show here, right? I'm just a pawn into the whole hierarchy. But of course, I try to put my stamp on it. So I'm also, Winston, not easily offended, I think. So, and most of the time it was positive. I remember once at Taylor's that we were in a meeting, school board, and then I thought it was one of a very nice memory. And then we were talking about maybe UE and the Brits and so on and so forth, and everyone. And all of a sudden it was, we're talking about white people here, and there is one of them is actually here at the table, but they completely ignored me because they forget that I like that. Then you have sort of blended in, usually because it's professionally. And I don't see myself. That's the thing. When I look around, I see all of you, but I don't see myself. So I forget often that I look the way I do. And I know people have sometimes reacted to me. That's what I call that status inflation. By the way, I don't hang out with the expats here. I tried initially. Generally, the Belgians are not very clubbable, so it's not because you're from Europe that you have to hang together. So I think I was privileged or lucky enough to grow up in a family that is open-minded, colorblind, accepting of. We would have our own open house. So you picked it up from your parents that it's not stranger danger, right? It's either stranger danger or it's exotic makes erotic. I think we were more like exotic is interesting, it's different. Let's find out, okay? Be curious about people from different parts of the world, people who look different, have different styles, habits, and not judgmental. It's a good training ground as a benefit as well. But overall, just the gist of it is fine, right? I have not been bullied or victimized just because of who I think I might look like or anything like that. Most of the racism I experienced in Malaysia was what I call white on white.
Oh, that happens?
Yeah, there's a lot of that, right? I'm a non-native speaker of English. I'm not Commonwealth. I'm from mainland Europe, the enemy. So among a lot of people I've met here, I don't feel like I get a good treatment. Yeah. There is an idea of the boys from Britain who have, ramified themselves across higher education in Malaysia. They want to keep that to themselves. And I had a few negative experiences in that way. but white on white, right? It's sort of that inward looking. It's an island. I mean, let's face it.
Give one or two key reasons why you had called Malaysia home during this time.
Home is a kind of an emotionally charged concept, right? And how many homes can we have? Will the place where you were born always be the only home? Can you rehome yourself like a pet? I think home and happiness to me is sort of related, right? Because in the history of ideas, by the way, happiness didn't feature till maybe in the 19th century. And before that, you were not supposed to think about being happy. But we live in a centuries where happiness is seen to be valuable, and so we want our lives to be meaningful. We want to do things with purpose. Oprah Winfrey always talks about that, the purposeful life, don't live your life randomly, make choices, go after things that you find is important, don't just react. So a little bit of that might be goal setting. I'm not a big goal setter. I think I like to think about sniffing out opportunities, and coming back to what Malaysia definitely has done for me is allowing me to follow through on opportunities. And in that mix of, or in that equation of happiness, to me, you always have an element of hope and optimism. What I said about the sense of space, I also get that in Malaysia. I've been down to Singapore a couple of times, but it's always like when you cross back into Malaysia, you feel like, oh, I can go anywhere, right? I can take a bike or a motorbike, preferably. You can go on a road trip, and you can go, to Rangoon, I guess. I don't know how far you can go.
Yeah,
and,
possibly, yeah.
not to be recommended.
Pre-COVID, yeah.
One of the key reasons then for having that feeling that I'm home is definitely with them. It's been a happy period, I think, generally speaking, where I'm doing meaningful work, where I feel I can contribute to even more than just students and colleagues. I've been involved in some, charity projects. I've also done things about public broadcasting with Dr. Rama. We worked for RTM and the Asian Pacific Institute for Broadcasting Development. I feel that I've been, fortunate enough to, because this is coming to an end as well. I think if there's been one or two nuggets or takeaways, that's, even if it's in opposition to what I said, I think it's good. So, and then the climate here is one where there is always a sense of, I play volleyball, and every sport has its own philosophy, right?
Yeah.
So the things I like about volleyball is there is a net to begin with, contact sport.
Come on, so does badminton, so does tennis.
And you rotate. In the old system, there was no specialization, so you would rotate.
Right.
And because we have frequent rallies, we have a lot of rallies. It's not a football match where you have 2 attempts on goal and then a penalty shootout. How boring can that be? In volleyball, you have always, and that's the philosophy, what I learned, there's always the next rally.
Yep.
You drop the ball, you mess up, you spike it out of court. There's the next rally before you have time to dwell on this.
Oh yeah.
And I think with Malaysia as well, there is always that sense of a new day. The next day is a new day, right?
Dust yourself up and try again, yeah.
Sorry?
Dust yourself up and try again.
Yeah, if you had a bad day, then the next day is a different day. And I've used the word before. There is a sense of that abundance, right? You don't have to go hungry. Of course, there is the B40. I'm aware of all of this, but it's much more difficult to explain. It's systemic, structural, historical, I think, but generally, it's a rich, joyful country, right? It's a peaceful country, and in that sense of a new day. And then, of course, professionally, to me, I told about my earlier years, but education has always been one of the most rewarding industries or disciplines or fields to be in. And not saying teaching is its own reward, I mean, but I cannot imagine doing anything else. I think it might become very repetitive, and I think I hope many of you who are also lecturers that we are privileged because we can learn with our students and we can, keep abreast, and and the research we do is interesting. It's an interesting side hustle as well. So,
Oh yeah.
and I think that's some of the reasons. I think if you take that away, I mean, if I wasn't happy and I would work perhaps elsewhere, it may be more of a challenge, or it would or Malaysia would not have that sort of rejuvenation and what's the word, that capacity to reinvent itself on a day-by-day basis. I'm not sure if you see it in the same way, but that's sort of my take on this. So,
Thank you so much, Dr. Antoon.
Thanks
Thank
for
you so
having
much
me,
for your time. Wow, there's so many nuggets of gold there for me to dissect through.
Good.
Yeah, wow. Always epic talking to you, Antoon. Very, very.
Yeah.